Hey there, friends, and welcome back to Continuing Education, the podcast where we dig into homeschooling with practical, down to earth advice you can actually use. Around here, we talk about all things homeschooling, things like choosing curriculum, building a workable schedule, planning field trips, surviving the occasional math meltdown, and yes, finding ways to stay sane and focused while juggling it all. I'm Heidi, your host, and today we're tackling a question that seems to come up every year, especially this time of year, right around back to school shopping time, when we're standing in the store with a cart full of fresh notebooks, sharpened pencils, and that one bottle of glitter glue our kids absolutely insisted on. The question is homeschooling tax deductible? If you've ever looked down at your overflowing cart of homeschool goodies and silently wondered, will the IRS help me out with this one? Then this episode's for you. Here's the thing. Homeschooling is an investment, not just an emotional investment or a mental investment, but with your time and energy and in dollars and in cents. Curriculum, workbooks, art supplies, science kit, online subscriptions, co-op classes, field trip fees, maybe even that shiny laminator that you wanted to build all of your curriculum around that you thought would change your life. All of it adds up. In some years, I've managed to homeschool for practically free, relying on the library, secondhand resources, swapping materials, bringing in my own things, going on the internet. Other years, we spent thousands. I know firsthand how important it is to find ways, legitimate ways, to offset those costs. And that's why one of the most common questions I hear from new homeschooling families is some version of, teachers in public schools to deduct their classroom expenses. Can homeschool parents too? Or maybe something like, I deducted tuition and fees for college. Can't I do the same for my child's homeschool education? It's a good question, and the answer is maybe. It depends on your situation, but we're going to unpack it today. The short answer is, for most U.S. homeschool families, homeschool expenses are not tax deductible, at least not at the federal level. So that means that when you sit down to file your federal taxes with the IRS, the money that you spent on books, curriculum, or supplies usually won't help you reduce your tax bill. There's no blanket homeschool deduction at the federal tax law level. Why not? The IRS considers education expenses for your own children to be personal expenses, not business or professional ones. And unlike higher education, K through 12 homeschooling doesn't have any kind of equivalent federal credit or deduction. Now, there have been some small pushes here and there to change that, but so far nothing has passed. There's probably a topic for another episode. You may have even heard about like the educator expense deduction and you're thinking, surely I qualify for that. This is a federal rule that allows classroom teachers to deduct up to $300 of their own out-of-pocket expenses for their classroom. First of all, might I just add in as a side note that $300 is just not nearly enough. I know lots of public school teachers who spend way more than $300 to fund their classroom. It sounds promising to us homeschoolers, but the tricky part is it's not actually designed for us. It's designed for K through 12 teachers in traditional schools. So in homeschool parents just don't qualify. Some states do recognize homeschool parents as educators, but it's rare. And even then, the deduction is usually still tied to being a W-2 employee of an actual school. So unfortunately, that federal deduction doesn't apply to most of us. But where things can get interesting is at the state level. So some states like Indiana, Illinois, and Minnesota, they offer education-related credits or deductions. So for example, in Minnesota, there's something called an education credit that can cover certain K through 12 expenses like textbooks, workbooks, and even some educational software, as long as they meet the criteria. Other states with some kind of program include Louisiana, Colorado, Oklahoma, and Idaho. So if you live in any of those 7 states, it's worth looking into those rules. Each one does have its own rules, limits, and definition of what counts. It can vary a lot by state. The rules can be very specific, and you do need to keep good records, receipts to prove your expenses. So before you get too excited, check with your state, the Department of Revenue, their website, or talk to a local tax preparer who's familiar with the homeschool rules in your state. There are a couple of special scenarios where some homeschool-related expenses might be deductible even at the federal level. The first is like a donation to a nonprofit. So let's say you donate money or supplies to a homeschool group or a sports league that's registered as a 501c3. That can be deductible as a charitable contribution. So for example, my kiddo plays for a football program that's also a nonprofit. They actually don't have fees, but you can provide donations. And so we donate money and then we can deduct that cost on our taxes if we choose to. So whether you're donating equipment or money, you can deduct those things. And if you run a business, which is similar to the next thing I'll mention, if you run a business and you donate to these organizations, maybe as a sponsor or something, you can deduct that. So the second exception is business related expenses. So if you're homeschooling as part of a business, so maybe if you run a tutoring service or you sell curriculum that you create or you operate a homeschool co-op as a business, certain expenses may be deductible. But here's the key with that. You do need to have a clear separation between your personal homeschool use and business use. So you can't just write off your child's coloring books because you sometimes use them with the tutoring student. But if you maybe design lesson plans, sell them online, and also use that same lesson plan with your student or your child, you can absolutely deduct things like software and printing and website hosting. Basically, you have a business and that you're also using those things for your own child in their homeschooling. You can deduct the business portion of those costs. Even if you don't qualify for a deduction right now, I still recommend keeping track of all your homeschool related purchases. There's a few reasons why. First, it helps to see where your money is going. Ever buy a curriculum, stick it on the shelf, and then forget about it? I do this all the time. Tracking expenses helps you avoid repeating that mistake. Second, it helps you budget better for the next year. So you know how much you typically spend on curriculum and supplies on activities. So as you're budgeting for the next year, you can take that into account so you're never hit with anything that's surprising. Third, it helps you see how much real money you're spending. So if you are the kind of homeschool parent who sells your curriculum after using it, like I do, every couple of years, I might sell the curriculum that I've used, especially if it's in really good condition, or it was one of those that I put on the shelf and never used. You always have your purchase price and then your sold price. And so the difference is how much that curriculum actually costs for you to use. Sometimes I feel pretty good about my purchase. The Matthew C curriculum that I bought, for example, I sold the manipulatives for what I thought was a pretty good, and it really offset the cost of using that Matthew C curriculum. The fourth reason to keep track is that laws change. So if your state adds a new credit or deduction in the future, you'll already have the documentation that you need to benefit, and you will have already set up a system that helps you keep track of it so it's not going to be cumbersome or feel overwhelming when the time comes. Here's a simple system. Save all your receipts, paper or digital, sort them into categories, just kind of label them curriculum, supplies, technology, extracurricular. I actually have a spreadsheet where I keep track of, it's a spreadsheet with different tabs that keeps track of everything, like the classes my kids are taking, their grades. Now that my kid's in high school, I'm needing to actually track those things. It has a tab for all the resources I might want to use. And then it also has a tab for costs of things that I've spent. So I keep a spreadsheet, but you could use a budget app and just kind of tag everything, whatever makes sense for you, somewhere that you can reference. Not only does this help with taxes, of course, but it gives you that clear picture of what your homeschool actually costs. We'll take a minute and we're going to, maybe bust 3 common myths that I hear all the time. So myth number 1, I can claim my child as a business expense. No, your child isn't a business deduction no matter how many chores they do. Myth number 2, if I buy a computer for homeschooling, it's automatically deductible. No, not unless it qualifies under a state credit or it's legitimately used in a business. Myth number 3 that I hear all the time is every state offers a homeschool tax break. No, many states don't. In fact, as we mentioned before, only about 7 that I found do. So that's why checking your specific state's rules is so important. Don't deduct things. You'll get in trouble with the IRS. You'll get audited. It's just not worth it. I hope that today's episode helped clear up some of the mystery around homeschool expenses and taxes. While the IRS isn't going to cover your glue sticks or math manipulatives, there are a few situations at the state level or in business contexts where you may be able to find some relief, as we kind of mentioned. If you found this episode helpful, share it with a fellow homeschool parent, especially that friend with a closet full of art supplies for just in case. They clearly need some help to help offset those costs. If you haven't already, hit subscribe so you never miss an episode. Until next time, keep learning, keep laughing, and keep homeschooling.